And just to kind of remind you, Ezekiel is the first of the two prophets that speak in the middle of the exile. Okay, so we've gone through and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Lamentations. Lamentations, you might can make a case is in the exile because it's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. But the truth of the matter is that Isaiah and Jeremiah are pre-exile prophets. They are trying to get Judah to turn before God punishes. And then we're going to see, we'll see a few more pre-exile as we go through the minor prophets. But then there are a list of prophets who are after the exile. And we've seen a couple of them. Haggai is after, that we've been looking at on Sunday morning. Zechariah, Malachi, a lot of those are post-exile prophets. The two major ones that are during the exile are Ezekiel and Daniel. Okay, they take place while Judah is in exile. Okay, and so some of it is still trying to deal with their sin. It is clear, and I'm going to say it this way, it's clear that Ezekiel is writing from Babylon, but the beginning of his writing is before the actual fall of Jerusalem, because we're going to see the temple kind of featured in a couple of things as we go forward. So it's important to understand that there is some cross in this, but the majority of Ezekiel is dealing with while they are in exile. Okay. We're going to kind of spend a little bit of time early in Ezekiel, and then we're going to spend probably the majority of our time towards the end of Ezekiel, because there's a couple of things that I want to make sure we get into. Let me make sure. Okay. All right. This just does not like me. Okay, there we go. There we go. So as we mentioned last week, Ezekiel is a member of the second siege of Jerusalem that happened in about 605 BC. The destruction of Jerusalem takes place in 587. So there's a little bit of time here. He's contemporary with Jeremiah, although he goes past where Jeremiah is. The main audience for Ezekiel, as opposed to like Jeremiah, Ezekiel's directing his prophecies toward the exiles in Babylon who are losing hope. So they've been kicked out of their land. They are stuck in Babylon and they're losing hope in God. And so in many ways, a lot of Ezekiel you're going to find as we get towards the end of Ezekiel is giving them hope that God's not done with them yet. Okay. That is a very, very important thing. The key verse is Ezekiel 39, verses 28 and 29. And it says, "Then they shall know that I am the Lord their God, because I sent them into exile amongst the nations and then assembled them into their own land. I will leave none for them remaining among the nations anymore. And I will not hide my face anymore from them when I pour out my spirit upon the house of Israel, declares the Lord God." So you can see the message of hope there. Okay. When we look at the sections, the first 24 chapters are judgment against Judah. So it's kind of the same thing as Jeremiah. Chapter 25 through 32 deals with judgment against other nations. And then starting in chapter 33, we have the restoration of Judah. And then chapter 40 through 48, a future temple. Okay, so a reinstitution of the Lord of worship. So when we get into chapter 1, it says, "In the 30th year of the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the Tiber Canal, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiachin. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the Chebar Canal, and the hand of the Lord was upon him there. Okay. So we get kind of a time frame that we're dealing with. Then we see God show up. Okay. This is kind of an interesting deal. It says, as I looked, behold, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually. And in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming metal. And from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. Okay. And this was their appearance. They had human likeness, but each one had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of a calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands. And the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Their wings touched one another. Each one of them went straight forward without turning as they went. As for the likeness of the faces, each one had a human face. Okay, the 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, the face of an ox on the left side, and the 4 had the face of an eagle. So had a human face, a lion face, an ox face, and an eagle's face. So they had 4 heads. They had 4 faces on their head. That is chapter 1, verse 6, or verse 10. Okay. Such were their faces, and their wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while two covered their bodies. So they had 2 sets of wings. The first set were up like this, touching, and the second were wrapped around their body. Okay. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went without turning as they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches moving to and from among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning, and the living creatures darted to and fro, like the appearance of the flashing of lightning. Okay, so this is once again, or maybe the best way to explain this is once again an explanation from Ezekiel's point of view of the seraphim, which is one of the groups of angels. Okay, remember that in Isaiah, we see them having 6 wings. The description's a little different. They had 6 wings. They flew with 2. They covered their faces with 2. They covered their feet with 2. And all of that in the temple. Then here we have this, and then in Revelation we have the 4 living creatures, which, while each of them has a different face, the faces are the same. So it's a vision. It's not a specific explanation of what they look like. It's a vision of them. And so the vision differs a little bit, but it is clearly the same group. In the hierarchy of the heavenly hosts, these are the ones who go with God that we see in the throne room. Okay. So then we see, as I looked at the living creatures, I saw a wheel on the earth beside the living creature, one for each of them. And for the appearance of the wheels and their construction, their appearance was like the gleaming of beryl, which is a precious stone. Okay. And the 4 had the same likeness, their appearance and construction being as it were a wheel within a wheel. Now, we don't completely understand what that means, but it's a picture. They went in any of their 4 without turning. Once again, the rims were tall and awesome, and the rims of all 4 were full of eyes all around. Okay, which is a description of the 4 living creatures in Revelation, is they had eyes everywhere. So understand, we're dealing with vision, but we're seeing these creatures that are with God. Then going on down to verse 26, we see, and above the expanse over their heads, there was the likeness of a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of the throne was a likeness with a human appearance, okay, which is God. So he's seeing a vision of God. Okay. And then he closes chapter 1. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of one speaking. So we see an image of them, of the Lord appearing. And then in chapter 2, he begins to talk. And he basically tells him, I don't want to go through all of it specifically, but it says, the Spirit entered into me, it says in verse 2, and set me on my feet, and I heard him speaking to me, and he said to me, Son of man, I send you to the people of Israel, the nation of rebels who have rebelled against me. Okay, so you're to be a prophet to my people. And then in verse 8, I think this is kind of the most interesting moment. It says, but you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Don't be rebellious like the rebellious house. So you don't be rebellious like they are. You do what I tell you. Okay. And he gives him a scroll. Okay. He hands him a scroll, and it's written on the front and on the back, and they were in it the words of lamentation and mourning and woe. So literally he's given a scroll that holds all of the calamity that's going to happen, the judgment. And then in chapter 3, he says, now eat the scroll. So eat this scroll, go and speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly with this scroll that I give you, and fill your stomach with it. Then I ate it, and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. Interestingly enough, the same picture shows up in Revelation with John, or something very similar. We see a powerful angel show up, and he's got 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the land, and he gives John a scroll. And he says, now eat this scroll. And he eats it, and he says it's sweet as honey, but as soon as he swallowed it, it becomes bitter in his stomach. Causes his stomach to be upset because it's words of judgment. Okay. Then when we move into verse 16 of chapter 3, God kind of gives him a wake-up call as to his job. And I do want to kind of go through this real quick. And at the end of 7 days, this is verse 16, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Okay, so let's ask a question. What is a watchman?
Someone who warns.
Okay.
If the enemy's coming.
Okay. He stands on a wall and he watches for the enemy. Okay. A sentry, a security guard, those type of jobs. Okay. He makes sure that he's paying attention and warns people if something is happening that shouldn't. Okay. So God says, I have set you as a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. If I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him no warning, nor speak to warn the wickedness from his wicked way in order to save his life, that wicked person shall die for his iniquity, but his blood I will require from your hand. So I want you to understand, this is a very real point of the prophet. They were called to speak what God told them to say. Okay. And God literally tells Ezekiel, if I tell you to tell this guy that he's going to die because of his sin, and you don't go tell him, he'll still die, but I'll hold you accountable because I told you to tell him. Okay. But if you, verse 19, but if you warn the wicked and he does not turn from his wickedness or from his wicked way, he'll die in his iniquity, but you'll be delivered. But you have done what you were supposed to. Okay. And then it goes on. Again, if a righteous person turns from his righteousness and commits injustice, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die. Because you've not warned him, he shall die for his sin, and his righteous deeds that he has done shall not be remembered. But his blood I will require at your hand. So if I tell you to warn someone and you don't, there are consequences. Okay. But then it goes on, but if you warn the righteous person not to sin and he does not sin, he shall surely live because he took the warning, and you will have delivered your soul. So I want to make this point because I think it's something that we need to understand when we talk about sharing the gospel. If God tells us to speak to someone and we don't, then in some ways, this is exactly where we're at. If we do, if we take the initiative to speak to them and they choose to reject it, then at least we've done what we were supposed to. But notice, this is exactly how he phrases it. If I tell you to talk to somebody and you don't, then there's consequences. But if you do, then they get to make the decision. Now, they still get to make the decision, but you were disobedient. See, that's kind of the idea. Okay. Then verse 22, and the hand of the Lord was upon me there. He said, now arise, go into the valley, and there I will speak with you. So I arose, went out in the valley, and behold, the glory of the Lord stood there, like the glory I had seen by the Chebar Canal, and I fell on my face. But the Spirit entered into me and set me on my feet, and he spoke with me and said to me, go shut yourself within your house. And you, O son of man, behold, cords will be placed upon you, and you shall be bound with them so that you cannot go out among the people. And I will make your tongue cling to the roof of your mouth so that you will be mute and unable to reprove them, for they are a rebellious house. But when I speak with you, I will open your mouth, and you shall say to them, thus says the Lord. He who will hear, let him hear, and he who will refuse to hear, let him refuse, for they are a rebellious house. Now, we're not going to get into all the details of this, but Ezekiel gets a lot of physical and sometimes uncomfortable object lessons that he has to do. For example, beginning at chapter 4, O you son of man, take a brick and lay it before you and engrave on it a city, even Jerusalem. Put siege works against it and build a siege wall against it and cast up a mound against it, set camps up against it and place battering rams against it all around. And you take an iron griddle and place it as an iron wall between you and the city and set your face toward it and let it be in the state of siege and press siege against it. This is a sign for the house of Israel. Then lie on your left side and place the punishment of the house of Israel upon it. For the number of the days that you lie on it, you shall bear their punishment. For I assign you a number of days, 390 days, that he has to lay on his left side. Then he turns over to his right side and lays there for 40 more days. Okay. Set your face toward the siege of Jerusalem with your arm bared, and you shall prophesy against the city. And behold, I will place cords upon you so that you cannot turn from one side to the other till you've completed the days of your siege. So basically, God says, I'm going to bound you so you can't move. Okay. So it goes on, and you shall take wheat, barley. So he gives him what to eat. Okay. And basically tells him during this 400 days, you'll take beans and stuff like that to make your bread, and you'll put them in one pot, make your bread that. And to cook it, you'll cook it on dung. And he begins by saying on human dung. But Ezekiel goes, oh, but I've never defiled myself. And he goes, okay, you can use cow dung. A little better. Now, as weird as that sounds, a lot of the early settlers in this area, that's what they used to cook with. It burns really, really well. And when you don't have a lot of wood, right? So the reason, though, is to remind them of the judgment that is coming. Okay. And it goes on, and then it tells him, in chapter 5, he gets told to shave his head and cut his beard off. Okay. Then we see some more judgment, but I want to focus on chapter 8 first. Chapter 8, I'm not going to go into great detail, but he takes him in the spirit to the temple so that he can see all the terrible things that they're doing against God inside the temple. Okay. And so he goes, dig into the wall, and behold, there was an entrance. I said, go in. I went in and saw on the wall every form of creeping thing and loathsome beast and all the idols of the house of Israel. And before them stood 70 men of the houses of the elders of the house of Judah. They're worshiping idols inside the temple. Okay, they're not even separating it. Okay, now chapter 10. Chapter 10 is kind of interesting because we come back and we once again see this throne and the man and the wheels and the cherubim. Okay. And this time, here's what happens. They lift off from the Holy of Holies in the temple and move to the door, and they stop there for a minute. Okay, they go to the threshold, and then they leave the threshold and they go up on the mountain, and then they leave completely. So Jeremiah has this vision of the glory of the Lord leaving the children of Israel. What? Ezekiel. Or Ezekiel. Ezekiel sees him leaving. Okay. Yes.
Didn't God make Jeremiah also lay on his sides like 40 days each?
I don't remember. I think so. Ezekiel is not the only one who had to do some rather weird object lessons. There are several of them. If you really want, the fun one is Hosea. Go marry somebody.
Yeah.
But understand that we see this moment and we see this idea that, remember, God's glory had dwelled in the temple for more than 400 years since its building by Solomon. But their wickedness has hit such a level now that God has said, nope, I'm done. I'm leaving. It really is a picture of, I'm leaving you to your fate. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is, at the end of Ezekiel, we're going to see him come back. Okay. As part of the message of hope at the end. But he abandons. Okay. In the end of chapter 11, we see kind of the first one of these that it says, look at chapter 11, verse 17. Therefore say, thus says the Lord God, I will gather you from the peoples and assemble you out of the countries where you've been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. So here's a moment where it's saying, hey, I know it's bad. I know that things have gone really bad, but I'm not done with you. I will gather you. And when they come here, they will remove from it all the detestable things and all its abominations, and I will give them one heart, and a new spirit I will put within them. I will remove the heart of stone from their flesh, and I give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my rules and obey them. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. Okay, so we see this. In chapter 12, we see another fun dramatization. Okay, so it says, Son of man, you dwell in the midst of a rebellious house, who have eyes to see but see not, who have ears to hear but hear not, for they are a rebellious house. As for you, son of man, prepare for yourself an exile's baggage and go into exile by day in their sight. You shall go like an exile from your place to another place in their sight. Perhaps they will understand, though they are a rebellious house. You shall bring out your baggage by day in their sight as baggage for exile, and you shall go out yourself at evening in their sight, as those do who must go into exile. In their sight, dig through the wall and bring your baggage out through it. In their sight, you shall lift the baggage upon your shoulder and carry it out at dusk. You shall cover your face that you may not see the land, for I have made you a sign for the house of Israel. So he has to dig a hole in the wall and leave with a bag, like almost like a hobo bag. So it's another object lesson. Okay. 13 deals with condemning false prophets, and 14 elders. We come in, and so all the way to the end of, we see this discussion of punishment. Chapter 16 is very interesting, though, and I want to kind of spend a minute here. Chapter 16 begins, again, the word of the Lord came to me. Make known to Jerusalem her abominations, and say, thus says the Lord God to Jerusalem, your origin and your birth are of the land of the Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite, and your mother a Hittite. And as for your birth, on the day you were born, your cord was not cut, nor were you washed with water to cleanse you, nor rubbed with salt, nor wrapped in swaddling clothes. No eye pitied you to do any of these things to you out of compassion for you, but you were cast out on the open field, for you were abhorred on the day that you were born. So basically, God says, hey, I want you to remember where you came from. You were nothing. You weren't loved. You weren't cared for or anything. And then it says, and when I passed by you and saw you wallowing in your blood, okay, in the blood of the birth, I said to you in your blood, live. I made you flourish like a plant of the field, and you grew up and became tall and arrived at full adornment. Your breasts were formed, your hair has grown, yet you were naked and bared. And then it says, when I passed by you again and saw you, behold, you were at the age for love. So I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your nakedness. And I made my vow to you and entered into a covenant with you, declares the Lord. And you became mine. Okay. So the idea is, I saved you then, but when I came back and you were old enough, then I called you to be my people. It's the marriage discussion. I covered your shame. Okay. And I made a vow to you. I made a covenant with you. I wrapped you in fine linen, covered you with silk, and I adorned you with ornaments and put bracelets on your wrists and a chain on your neck. And I put a ring on your nose and earrings in your ear and a beautiful crown on your head. Thus you were adorned with gold and silver, and your clothing was fine linen and silk and embroidered cloth. And then it comes to verse 15, and this is the point that God is trying to make through Ezekiel. You were nothing until I found you. But once I found you, and once I gave you beauty, once I made you mine, verse 15, but you trusted in your beauty and played the whore. So after all I did to bring you to where you were not faithful. Okay. And then it goes on a little bit further in verse 20, and you took your sons and daughters whom you had borne to me, and these you sacrificed to them to be devoured. Were your whoring such a small matter that you slaughtered my children and delivered them up as an offering by fire to them? So he's talking about idols. Notice, was your unfaithfulness to me such a small matter that you took my children and you gave them to be burned? Okay. Remember, we've talked about how many times has God said within the prophets that we have looked at the absolute in fury that he has towards the sacrifice of their children. You see that as kind of the ultimate culmination of their wickedness, that they sacrifice their children. Okay. So, interestingly, though, enough, while at verse 58, we get this idea, you bear the penalty of your lewdness and your abominations, declares the Lord. Then in verse 59, it says, for thus says the Lord God, I will deal with you as you have done. You have despised the oath in breaking the covenant. Yet I will remember my covenant with you in the days of your youth, and I will establish for you an everlasting covenant. Then you will remember your ways and be ashamed when you take your sisters, both your elder and your younger, and give them to you I give them to you as daughters, but not on account of the covenant with you. I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall know that I am the Lord, that you may remember and be confounded, and never open your mouth again because of your shame when I atone for you for all that you have done, declares the Lord. You're going to suffer for what you did, but I haven't given up on you. Okay. Chapter 18, we're not going to read through it, but I'm going to mention there was a proverb that says that, well, the reason we're suffering was because our parents sinned. It wasn't us. It was our parents who sinned, and now we're suffering. And God goes, no, we're not going to say that anymore. It's your own sin. You are responsible for your own sin. Okay. That leads us to 24. Starting in chapter 25, actually the end of 20, we see the Lord will restore. We have seen some of these things. We see a little moments of hope. Chapter 24 tells us in the 9th year in the 10th month, the word of the Lord, the king of Babylon has laid siege to Jerusalem this very day and destroyed it. We also see his wife die. Then beginning in chapter 25, we suddenly have a change to the prophecies, and now he's prophesying against other nations. He's talking about the punishments that are going to happen to all the other nations because of their sin. Okay. There are a couple of places where we're not going to get into a lot of that, but he prophesies against Egypt. He laments for Egypt. All of these nations that have been wicked, God speaks to Ezekiel over them. Okay. Then, where I kind of want us to get to is when we get to chapter 36. Okay. So here is what it says. Starting in verse 16. We're going to start there. Okay. Chapter 36, verse 16. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, when the house of Israel lived in their own land, they defiled it by their ways and their deeds. Their ways before me were like the uncleanness of a woman in her menstrual impurity. So I poured out my wrath upon them for the blood they had shed in the land, for the idols with which they had defiled it. I scattered it among the nations, and they were dispersed through the countries. In accordance with their ways and their deeds, I judged them. But when they came to the nations, wherever they came, they profaned my holy name, in that the people said to them, these are the people of the Lord, and yet they had to go out of his land. Okay. But I had concern for my holy name, which the house of Israel had profaned among the nations to which they came. And then comes this very interesting moment. Therefore, say to the house of Israel, thus says the Lord God, it is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I am about to act, but for the sake of my holy name, which you profaned among the nations to which you came. And I will vindicate the holiness of my great name, which you have profaned among the nations, and which you have profaned among them. And the nations will know that I am the Lord, when through you I vindicate my holiness before their eyes. I will take you from the nations, and I will gather you from all the countries to bring you into your own land. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean from all your uncleanness, and from all your idols I will cleanse you. And then here comes the biggest part. And I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put in within you. We've heard this before. And I'll remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. You shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and you shall be my people, and I will be your God. And I will deliver you from all your uncleanness. Okay? So we see once again this moment of hope. I'm going to bring you back. But I want to make sure you understand, and this is a very real discussion. God tells them without the slightest qualm, it's not because of you. Okay. I think this is important to understand. God, because I think salvation falls under this same discussion. It's not because you were good enough. It's not because you were better. It was not because you were more righteous. It's not because you were more intelligent. It was for the sake of my name that I did this. Okay. We sometimes lose sight of the fact, but it's a biblical understanding, that God's primary motivation is his own glory. And that sounds really weird because you think, well, that sounds awfully conceited. Conceit is false pride. Conceited is when you really don't deserve it. But when you're the God of the universe, you deserve all glory. So you're only getting what you deserve. Okay. One of the confessions, I think, probably gets it. The end of man is to love God and enjoy and to enjoy his presence. Okay. The ultimate reason that we are here is to love him and to live with him. Now, we blew that up badly, but for the sake of God's own name, he has offered us a way of coming back. Okay?
Do you think that when it says that they will be given a new heart, is whenever they accept Jesus as the Messiah?
I think that is the ultimate answer of that. Okay, so understand. I think that there is a discussion of, I'm going to remove those things that were displeasing, the abominations. I'm going to cover your nakedness. I'm going to cover your shame. I think all of that is part of that for the people that are hearing this then. The ultimate expression of that is, yes, it's Jesus. That when we surrender our lives to Jesus, he gives us a new heart. He gives us a new, he makes us brand new. Okay, because remember, and this is an important part of this. In our culture, so let's take our culture. What does the heart typically represent? Right, our emotions.
Life.
Well, life is part of it, but love and almost an emotional thing. So look at the songs. Okay, that is not what it means here. The heart in biblical times, both Old and New Testament, is the center of who you are. It's not just the emotional part of you. It is the center of your will, your mind, your action. Okay? And it makes sense that that would be the case, because what does the heart do? Okay, but how does it keep you alive?
Pump your blood.
Where?
To your brain.
Where else?
All your other organs.
Everywhere. Okay? So understand. They would have understood well enough that the heart, as it beats, sent fluid to every part of your body. So it must be the center of who you are because it sends stuff everywhere. Now, we understand that reason and all of that stuff come from here. Okay? But in the biblical understanding, they would have understood it as this. And we've talked about this before. Emotions in the Bible when they discuss emotions, they talk lower.
Yeah.
They talk about your gut. Well, once again, let's make an understanding of why they thought that. When you are having an incredible fit of emotions, what tends to hurt? Here. You can be so emotionally distraught that your stomach, your bowels, all of that suffers. Well, that must be where they come from. I heard a comedian go, it would ruin a lot of love songs.
So many.
Okay. And he goes on to go, don't tell my bowels, my achy breaky bowels. Okay. I left my bowels in San Francisco. He does also joke about that, when one of those Old Testament patriarchs was sitting with his wife and you move me, baby. But understand that when he says, I'll give you a new heart, in many ways, it is the same analogy that we get into as we become a new creation because everything that we are becomes new. I take out that dead heart of rock that has no life, right? Does a rock have any life?
I would say no, but I want to argue yes.
Okay. So I'm going to take that out and I'll put a living heart in. And it's new. And you'll be mine and I'll be yours forever. Okay. Then in chapter 37 is one of the kind of interesting discussions. And it comes back, by the way, the same thing comes up again. But he talks about a valley filled with dead bones. Okay. And the idea is that these bones have been dead so long that they're ready to crumble. Okay. There is a reason that it's done this way. It's kind of an interesting discussion. The Jews believed, and this comes up with Jesus too. The Jews believed that when a person died, their soul would hang around for about 3 days. And then it would go on. Okay. Which is almost certainly the reason that Jesus waited 4 days to raise Lazarus.
So is that real?
That's what they believed. I don't know if it's real or not, but that's what they believed. I don't think that I think the Bible teaches that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But in their understanding of it was that it hung around for a little bit. Okay. Not unlike the fact that when you hear the term graveyard shift. So the graveyard shift was this idea that because every once in a while you would have somebody fall into a coma and they would think they were dead and they would bury them. And so it was not an uncommon thing in certain areas for them to tie a bell to the person's toe when they buried them. And then they would have somebody at the grave for the first couple days in case they woke up. And if they woke up, then when they moved their toe, the bell would ring and they could dig them back up. Not the most pleasant thought.
Really not. Right? Be a very life lesson.
But understand that, and some of those superstition things that we deal with even today in our culture come from that idea. But there is a reason if they believed that after 3 days all hope was gone, and then Jesus comes at day 4 and goes, hey, get up. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
In fact, it was so big of a deal. Not only were they trying to kill Jesus, they were going to murder Lazarus.
So Jesus didn't necessarily believe that, but he did that because he knew that.
That would be what I would. That would be my assessment of it. Okay, it is really the culmination miracle in John. No, I don't think that I don't personally believe that is true. But it is clear that that was a Jewish belief at the time. Okay. But in this case, we're even further. We're talking about, and it says, behold, they were very dry, which means that they had been there long enough. Best way I can explain it around here is whenever you find the skull of a deer that's been there for a couple years. And it's now dry and not necessarily brittle, but I mean, it's done. Like there's no more flesh on it. There's no more.
It's baked in the sun.
It's been baked in the sun. So there's this whole these bones, and God goes, can these bones live? And Ezekiel goes, well, I think you're the only one who knows that. And he says, okay, prophesy over these bones and tell them to get up. It says he hears a rattling and all these bones stand up. And then he says, now prophesy that flesh will cover those bones. And suddenly flesh comes and covers all the bones. It says, now prophesy to the breath and say, breathe. And they all come back to life. Now, it's a vision as opposed to an actual event. But it is once again this idea. And it's the same idea that we saw in 36 that was so important. Okay? I'm going to give you new life.
Yeah.
So everybody thinks you're way too far gone and way too far dead to come back. But I can still move. Okay? And literally, it says, watch, I'll go ahead and read this a bit. So I prophesied as I was commanded, this verse 7. As I prophesied, there was a sound, and behold, a rattling. And the bones came together, bone unto its bone. And I looked, and behold, there were sinews on them, and flesh had come upon them, and skin had covered them, but there was no breath in them. So they're still dead. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, and say to the breath, thus says the Lord God, come, O four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came to them, and they lived. And then he said to me, this verse 11, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up. Our hope is lost. We are indeed cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says the Lord God, behold, I will open your graves and raise you from your graves, O my people. And I will bring you into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am the Lord. And when I open your graves and raise you up from your graves, O my people. You think it's hopeless? It's not. Okay. Chapter 38 and chapter 39 are specifically about Gog and Magog. And it is a story. I'm going to say this. I believe it has not happened yet. I'm going to say it that way. But that Gog and Magog and a couple other nations come and attack Israel. And in the midst of their attack, God moves and not one house in Israel is destroyed, and God sends fire down from heaven to destroy all their instruments of war, all their chariots, all their horses, all of that, and completely saves them. Okay. Typically, most scholars believe that Gog is a reference to what is modern day Russia. That would be the place. And Magog is its king. Okay. I'm sorry. Magog is the land. Gog is its king. Okay. So there is a belief that one of the things that will happen in the end is there'll be a massive attack against Israel where God will intercede. Just so you know that. Then we kind of move forward. The Lord will restore. And then we see visions of a new temple. The rest of the book kind of deals with this. Visions of the new temple.
Is that an earthly temple or?
I would tell you that, yes. It's hard to know for sure how he's saying it. I think.
But it's not built
It's not built. I would tell you it's not built yet. And the reason why is because the way they talk about it does not fit with the temple that was built during the exile, after the exile. Okay.
Does that mean that it needs to be physically rebuilt?
The Bible seems to indicate there will be a physical rebuild. I'm going to tell you that I think this particular one is a picture of a heavenly temple as opposed to an earthly temple. And here is why I say that. You don't have to agree with me, and we can certainly talk about it more if you want to another time. But I believe that Revelation teaches that the third temple that's built on earth is actually built in rebellion to God. Well, that is part of that. But that is the ultimate discussion. We know that there is a discussion in Revelation of the Antichrist coming and defiling the temple. Well, there has to be a temple for him to defile it. But understand that the temple is no longer necessary. The sacrificial system is no longer necessary. And there is a discussion, even within Revelation, of this idea that as the Jews rebuild the temple, the prophets are saying, you shouldn't be doing that. They are rebuilding it so they can go back to what was, go back to the old covenant, where it's not needed because that covenant's been fulfilled. Okay. There's a lot to that, though. This, I think, is more along the lines of a picture of God moving in their midst again and God returning his, which comes back to 43 is kind of the most important part of this. Chapter 43. Okay. It says, then he led me to the gate facing east, and behold, the glory of the Lord of Israel was coming out of the east. The sound of his coming was like the sound of many waters. So watch. Back in chapter 10, we saw the glory of the Lord lift off the old temple, move to the door, and then move to a mountain on the east and leave. Here we see the glory of the Lord coming back from the east and coming back. Now, I think there's a couple of directions to this. I think you can make a case for Jesus.
So did he go up in the east?
Well, here's the big one. Here's the big one on that front. The mountain that God speaks of Jesus returning on is in the east of Jerusalem. Okay, so
Same where he left.
right, same point where he left. There is a lot of, I'm going to just be completely fair. You are dealing with a lot of details that we really don't know all the answers to. But what is the point here is this, is God is not done with them. He is going to return for them. And he's going to return into a relationship with them. Okay. He's dealing with the temple. I think part of it is he's dealing with the temple because that's what they would have understood. That was their understanding of God's presence among them. Okay. But then he goes back and he talks about the portion and he goes back into a lot of the details as all of this. Now, interestingly enough, this is part of this and comes back to the heavenly temple discussion. It says that chapter 47 says, then he brought me back to the door of the temple, and behold, water was issuing from below the threshold of the temple toward the east. The water was flowing down from below the south end of the threshold of the temple, south of the altar. Then he brought me out by the way of the north gate and led me around on the outside. And behold, the water was trickling out on the south side. Okay, so water coming from the temple. Now, we're going to close with this. Go to Revelation chapter 22. Or 21. 21, sorry. There is no chapter 22. What? Oh, there is. Sorry. It's been a long week. Sorry. Sorry, it is 22.
Okay.
Okay. So then the angel, so chapter 22, verse 1 says, Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Okay. Revelation tells us there is no, in the New Jerusalem, there is no temple because God is the temple. Okay, that's the end of chapter 21. However, Ezekiel would have understood it according to the temple. But here's the interesting thing. Water flowing out. And in this case, the water is the river of life. And on the banks of the river are the trees of life that were taken away when Adam and Eve sinned.
It says the same thing as Ezekiel with different fruit.
So definitely they are picturing the same thing or some of the same things. Like I said, though, I think that in some ways Ezekiel explains it as a new temple because that's what they would have understood. Whereas when we come to after the resurrection of Jesus and after the coming of salvation and the changing of the covenant, the reason that Revelation goes, well, there's no temple, well, is because God himself is the temple. In the same way that there's no sun. So no sunrise or sunset because God is all the light you ever need. Which also helps us to understand something in Genesis. On day 1, God goes, let there be light. There's no sun till day 4. The first 3 days of creation, there's no sun or moon or stars. It's just let there be light. The glory of God. Which is why Jesus saying, I am the light of the world is such a big deal. Because God is light. Understand that all those I am statements in John are him saying, I'm God. I'm living water. I'm the bread of life. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the light of the world. I'm the resurrection and the life. All of those are him claiming godhood. Because they're all attributes of God. Imagine somebody going, I am life. The context is important. Lazarus has been dead 4 days. Your brother's going to rise again. I know he's going to rise again on the last day. Big help, Jesus. No, I am the resurrection and the life. I understand that's how they saw it. He says, your brother will rise again. And she's thinking, well, yeah, I know he's going to rise again on the last day because everybody's going to rise. So she was a Pharisee. Bite. And he goes, no, you don't understand. I am the resurrection. I am the one who brings life. And maybe not directly, but I think there's a little bit of a point to Ezekiel 37. Dry bones, speak to the breath and tell them to live again. And they lived again. Lazarus, come out. There's a lot of very powerful things within this discussion that give us a picture of what Ezekiel's trying to give them. God is not done with you. Do they understand all the way to the end? No, because they have not even seen the first coming of Jesus. But the hope is still based on the same thing, that God is going to move. And that's kind of the whole point. You're being judged because of what you've done, but I'm not done with you yet. All right, we will stop there. We will pick up with Daniel next week, which is much shorter than
Pretty long, wasn't it?
Yeah.
since you have your card, you take it with you.
Sure will. I'd love to.
Okay. So council, I have a right